Senators Kennedy and Hatch. We said, we'll get this big coalition, and we'll speak with one voice, but we're going to hash it out. And so I think we also, as a sector, have to decide, well, what are our priorities? What do we care about? And then literally have the conversation so that we're not undermining each other, because what you said is right. One of us can get up and say, well, we shouldn't be second class, then another one might say, well, no, that should be, but not this group. Now, we're not all going to agree on everything. But I think the more we can, have meetings like this where we say, well, what's our agenda, what's important? And not just for our own self-interest, by the way. Also for the people that we care about that we're working for. I mean, who's speaking for low-income people? Who's speaking for undocumented workers? Who's speaking for the vulnerable that don't have the lobbyists and the high-priced people that actually, can affect public policy? And often, we all have the best experience because we're at the grassroots ground level. So we know what's going on, and I also think we got to get comfortable with that. So it's a process, both organizing ourselves as well as figuring out what's our role in a larger public policy, civic engagement environment, where at the end of the day, it has huge impact, all the public policy that goes on.
More questions? Next.
David, hi.
Hi, Alan. How are you?
Good.
I just wanted to do a quick follow-up to Deborah's question, because this issue about trying to get young women who may have an MSW in sociology and want to go to work for a battered women's shelter, and they simply can't do it at $26,000 or $27,000 a year. That was the basis upon which the changes that were made in 2007 in the Cost of College Reduction Act were made. Michael Weeks worked hard on it. We worked on it, others. But to let people know that, in fact, that bill passed. Now, if someone wants to go to work in the nonprofit sector, they can cap their loans at 15% of their salary. So if their salary goes up, salary goes down, it's tied to their rate of salary. And if folks want to know more about that and a way to recruit nonprofit employees, they can just they can Google CCRA, the Cost of College Reduction Act. And they really ought to start making use of it because, in fact, a lot of folks don't know about it. They haven't recruited on that basis. Senator Kennedy worked hard to get that provision in that bill. And it's not a perfect answer, but it's certainly better than, I think, nothing at all, and folks ought to know about it.
That's great.
And thanks for all you do, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you for raising that and your leadership on it.
We have time for one more question. Who wants to be the brave soul here? Right here, down front.
Hi, my question is, what strategies do you think will be most effective in forging a greater number of public and private partnerships?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I wrote a whole book about that. But just off the top of my head, I'd say a couple things. First of all, has to start with a willingness to partner. Secondly, you have to have an understanding that in a partnership, both sides have to benefit. It just can't be one way. And honestly, too often, in our sector, we say, well, okay, go to the private sector. You've got the money, or the philanthropy has the money. We can solve the problem. Just give us some money and let us go. It's got to be a two-way thing. We learned this. I learned this from working with Judith Kidd at Bank of Boston. We sat down with them. We said, okay, well, how are we going to engage our employees? And they provided mentors for the team, and they were team sponsors. And yes, we put their logo on our T-shirts, and that was fine. And we got them involved. Partnership has to be both. So having an understanding that, and literally sitting down and saying, well, how does 1 + 1 = 3? How can we work together? Not just looking at checkbook philanthropy, but because there's so many resources in the private sector that you can tap. People who have unbelievable expertise on any issue that you're going to deal with. But then also being, talking to public policy leaders and educating them. I mean, one of the reasons I decided to run for office is I found from talking to people in Congress that not enough of them knew about what was happening at the local level in the social sector and breakthrough innovations, and spending that time to educate our political leaders. And I'm not being critical. There's so many issues they got to deal with, so that they understand, well, there are really interesting solutions happening, and how do we change public policy so that public-private partnerships get easier? So that funding isn't just done on a formula basis, for example, or isn't just done through government agencies, that nonprofits can compete just as equally. Often they're more effective. I mean, that was one of the things that happened in the original AmeriCorps legislation. There was actually, a third of the money was done on formula because it just had to be politically, but 2/3 of it was done in a competition. 1/3 at the state level, 1/3 at the national level. And the whole Corporation for National Service was designed to be a funding vehicle to help build public-private partnerships, partially because Bill Clinton had done that as governor, and Eli Siegel, who'd been in the public sector and the private sector, understood that. So also spending the time and making it easy, saying, well, here's how it could work. I mean, those are some of the things I'd say. But and finally, having understanding, I think, and again, this is part of the reason I wrote the book, that our solutions are so complicated now. Our challenges are so great. I think almost you take any issue, you're going to need some type of public-private partnership. You're going to need all three legs of that stool. You need the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit social sector as an overarching strategy, whether it's education, healthcare, the environment, any social need. And so starting from that position, you know, well, what is the right role for each sector? And the partnerships will shift and change based on the issue. But too often people look at one sector or the other and say, well, it's up to them, or even, and also as a partnership, not, well, you're the junior partner. And I think that, you know, having that mindset is part of the reason why I think we as a sector, we have to accelerate, you know, what Bill Drayton has called the citizen sector and this revolution that's happening. And it really is. It's very interesting that our sector is growing faster than the other, that there's so much dynamism here, that things are changing. Young people want to come into this sector. There is something special going on, and not just in America, all over the world. That's what I learned when I traveled 15 years ago, and it's been ever more so. So I think we have to be conscious about it, and we have to try and help force the change while being the change. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Alan, so much. Appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Good.
Thank you.
Token. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break while we invite our panelists to come up. So if you want to stretch your legs, refresh your coffee, eat a cookie, and then come back. Thank you. Thank you. Shh. Thank you. Thank you.
Looks like people are lining up for cookies back there.
That's all right.
Thank you, Jeff. That reminds me of when you're raising small children and, you know, you're trying to get their attention and you finally just whisper, and then you get their attention. Oh. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all here, and that was just terrific. Alan's speech was fabulous. I know I really enjoyed it. So I'm Ellen Remmer, president of the Philanthropic Initiative and also a trustee of the Remmer Family Foundation and a board member of AGM. And I'm really pleased to be moderating this program with a fabulous group of your peers here for the next little bit less than an hour, who are going to share their thoughts on both Alan's extraordinary messages and talk also generally about the state of the sector here in Massachusetts and New England and around the country. We did a very deliberate job in selecting the panelists. As you'll see as you look at the bios, they come from different corners of the philanthropic and citizen sectors: corporate, philanthropy, private foundations, community foundations, nonprofit organizations, public charities, and are also all very thoughtful and pioneering thinkers with many years of experience. Again, look at their bios, but let me just quickly, because we don't have name tags, tell you so you can connect the bios with the faces. So we have David Abelman immediately here on my left, Executive Director of the Tufts Health Plan Foundation, and also Vice President and Deputy General Counsel to Tufts Health Plan. Next to David, is not the next person on my list, is Patricia Quinn, Executive Director of the Massachusetts Alliance on Teen Pregnancy, who I think was my family's foundation, one of our first grantees. It's kind of like 20 years ago. Next to Patricia is Richard Ward, Executive Director of the Brookline Community Foundation. And next to Richard is Kelly Bates, Executive Director of Access Strategies Fund. Let me just note briefly that unfortunately our fifth panelist, Bob Gallery, President of Massachusetts Bank of America, was unable to attend at the last minute today. So, but we've got great representation here. So we have until 3:45 for this section.